Welcome to part 2 of the CFB Analyst Offseason podcast, number 2 podcast, I should say. And today we're going to be discussing a little more on college football with terms of fan debate, with generational divide, and talk a little bit about history and maybe a little bit about Georgia, but not necessarily really about Georgia. We'll get to all that. Also, UConn realignment. That'll be first on the table after I just mentioned this one thing. Last podcast I went on a tangent. It was 44 minutes long. I'm not going to keep this over a half hour. I'm going to have a timer for every single one, 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how much I have to talk about. But I will not exceed 30 minutes. UConn has announced that they will go into the Big East with basketball, leaving the American in all sports, including football. Now, the Big East doesn't have a football conference anymore, as that disbanded prior to the 2013 season, as that was when the American was founded. And a lot of those Big East teams went to the American or Power 5 conferences. For example, Pitt went to the ACC, Louisville and Rutgers eventually going Power 5, Rutgers to the Big Ten, Louisville, and Syracuse as well going to the ACC. So with this happening, this is the first movement we've really seen in a while from the AAC too, which is since they merged into divisions a few years back. I honestly think that this is best for all parties because UConn women's basketball has been so dominant in the AAC, it's not even funny. It hasn't been competitive. I think moving to the Big East for them is going to be a lot more competitive. And I also think that football should land on their feet in a conference or as an independent. Either way, they're going to be able to create their own schedule and create a more competitive and geographical schedule. I mean, this upcoming year, they're going to have to go to UCF, which that's not close to UConn. But now they can go ahead and schedule teams like Boston College. They can schedule UMass, Army, and Rutgers or Temple. Keep Temple on the schedule, keep Navy on the schedule, but you don't have to travel to Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Oklahoma, all these other places just in conference. Because there really isn't too many places that close to the University of Connecticut in the American Athletic. I think it works out for all parties, and I also, because of how high the rise of UConn men's basketball was, with Shabazz Napier leading them to a national championship over Kentucky in a 7-8 seed game, that miracle run, that might have to do with the fall of UConn because it's going to be hard to replicate that same success as they had. With that being said, though, maybe you can look at them joining the AAC and saying, this hurt their basketball program in the men's side, so that was their crowning achievement. And frankly, them joining the AAC, they knew what they were getting into. They knew they were. It's not like they were playing a bunch of powerhouses in football, but at the same time, they're going to be playing in a conference that focuses more on football than basketball because they wanted to improve their football program and get it up to a level at least to what they had under Dan Orlovsky. They brought back their old coach Randy Edsall, and that hasn't worked. That hasn't panned out. They had the worst defense in college football a year ago in FBS play, at least. I think it's a great move for them, and hopefully they can land in a conference or get an independent bid. I don't want to see them fall to the FCS level, but if that is what it is going to take for UConn to make this transition in basketball, it will be better for all their athletic departments if they made this transition, by the way, then so be it, because that's what's going to be best. I know UConn isn't going to move to the FCS unless it's absolutely 100% necessary for them to do it. I don't think they've been so bad, specifically because of their BCS bowl appearance and their consistency in the early 2010s, late 2000s. I don't think they will move down to the FCS level. Now, there was an interesting topic brought up on Feinbaum's show after they talked, or prior to them talking about UConn, because this was a couple days before that. And it was a 16-year-old. Now I'm 18, so I can relate. I'm the same generation as the 16-year-old. And he called in saying that there was a generational gap, and this generation follows players more than teams. Now, with some sports, that might be true. Certainly with the NBA, that's true. You're seeing a lot of guys follow wherever LeBron goes. That's who they like. They're going to like the Lakers now, even though they like the Cavs the last few years. They are going to stick wherever Kevin Durant goes. So they were OKC, and then they were Golden State, and if he leaves, they're going to stick with him. Kawhi Leonard going to have a fan base. Kyrie had a fan base when he left Cleveland. Some Cleveland kids said, let's go to Boston and cheer on Kyrie. So it's stuff like that. In my sport, lacrosse, PLL, the basis of PLL is a Premier League where you pick your teams that you root for based on who's on it. And frankly, I liked it, but they also kept it region-based. So you might pick a team because they come from your region. So, like, my team is the Archers. Archers filled with Midwest talent, guys who played either professional, college, or high school in the Midwest. They went ahead and had them. That's my team because I like them. They got a lot of guys from the Ohio Machine, from the MLL, and that's who I like. But in college football, it's just not the same thing. And frankly, in NFL, it's just not the same thing. I mean, football is more of a team sport than most sports. When you look at basketball, it's 5-on-5, and there's only 12 to 15 guys on the roster, usually about 13 on the active roster, not on the technical team roster, but the active roster. So not everyone does this. I don't do this, but in the NBA, you can certainly make an argument for following a player. I used to do it with LeBron, and then I didn't like LeBron. I grew out of that when I was like 12. I was in love with LeBron. When I was 14, I hated LeBron. But in football, it's just not the same thing. I don't see many people saying Peyton Manning went from the Colts to the Broncos. Well, I guess I'm going from a Colts fan to a Broncos fan. No, Colts fans were just like, all right, we love you, Peyton. We love what you did. Let's get this Andrew Luck guy shot. Or let's get this Andrew Luck guy in here and give him a shot. As a Bears fan, I love Brian Urlacher. When he went out, all right, this young core, and Roquan Smith's that guy that can possibly fill the shoes of Brian Urlacher. Maybe not be as good as Urlacher was, but fill that role. Same, and Lance Briggs left. Khalil Mack, despite the fact that he's more of an edge rusher rather than an all-around linebacker like Briggs was. So football's just not wired that way. I'm going to root for whoever's starting at quarterback. I was hard on Martell even at Ohio State. I'm even harder on him outside of Ohio State with Miami because with Ohio State fans, I don't have to have a filter anymore about him. I'm like, I never thought he was any good. The only times when I talked about Martell not being good was when I was approaching it as a subjective point of view. But anytime I approach it as a fan and they're like, as an Ohio State fan, what do you think about your quarterback situation? I love Haskins, and I hope Martell, when he gets his shot, succeeds. That's all you can really say. But when I looked at it from a point of view that was different than fan, and that was completely subjective, like I'm doing here, subjective being it's my personal opinion, being objective but not biased, I hated Martell. I didn't think he was a good quarterback. And I loved Haskins as a pocket passer, as an NFL guy, but I was thinking this guy can't get hurt because I don't want to see Martell go up there, and I know they won't burn a shirt on Matt Baldwin, who I liked. I didn't love. I liked. I followed him and Haskins. Those were the first guys I intensely followed through the recruiting trail that ended up at Ohio State. Haskins, by the way, I followed when he was committed to Maryland and was still in love with the guy in terms of a football aspect. So the generational gap, well, some people might follow Tebow. Well, yeah, maybe you will, but you can't tell me that most of the people who root for Tebow now weren't Florida fans or Broncos fans. Because, I mean, I'm a fan of Tebow. I'm not a fan of Florida. Gosh, when I was younger, I was seeing Florida lose. And Tebow cried. I remember being with my mother, and we were kind of rejoicing at the fact that Tim Tebow was crying, even though I like the guy. Right now, looking back at it, I like the guy, and I like Urban. But how you feel personally and frankly professionally, if you're just looking at Ohio State perspective as a fan of Ohio State, they were at Florida. They kicked our behinds in 07, the 06 championship, 07, January of 2007. They kicked our behinds. I hate them. And frankly, it's taken a while for me to finally flush out that hatred for Florida, and I'm out of it. I don't like Florida necessarily, but I'm impartial with them, and I'm unbiased with anyone when it comes to just talking. Like Michigan, I hate Michigan with all my guts as a fan, but just talking about them, I'm going to be honest about what I think of them. Shea Patterson not being a good quarterback isn't because he's a quarterback at Michigan. I've been saying that Dylan McCaffrey is going to be a very good quarterback at the University of Michigan if he gets a shot, so they should give him a shot. I also forget what else I was going to talk about in this podcast. Oh, yeah. The Georgia thing. So I was listening to Feinbaum. I wasn't really paying attention. Apparently, one of their players, I haven't been paying attention to this at all. Apparently, one of their players was caught hitting a woman wrong, and especially if you're the aggressor, wrong. But I also heard Paul Feinbaum, and this is getting a little bit political. When one of his callers was saying that a lot of these times they could be provoked by the woman, I think both of them were wrong because, frankly, it's not that often where women provoke a fight with a man because, I mean, women are not, as the pagan days really showed, they're more passive aggressive in general. I'm talking in general. I'm not saying every individual woman is like this, but they're more passive aggressive rather than straightforward. So that's just not true. I mean, that's just false. But even with the women that do provoke an argument and get out of control and start hitting you and stuff, Paul Feinbaum saying that you should never lay a finger on a woman. I mean, if she's going to do harm to someone and just pulling her or getting her, grabbing her and taking her out of the situation and not even like throwing a punch, you're going to say that's wrong? And plus, when after he hung up, a couple callers later, they were talking about this situation, and he said that we know what this man did. He clearly had it. I mean, he implied it. He said, we both know the answer to this if he hit a woman, because we both know he hit. No, you don't. No one does. All right. And frankly, if they did, why didn't they press charges? Number one, and number two, there's no way of just knowing that based on comments. And he said it was based on the comments that he's made in that. No, that. Look, I respect Paul Feinbaum as a college football analyst and talking straight college football, but do me a favor, stay in your lane. Do not talk about politics. I'm not going to go and talk about politics. I'm not going to go talk about this topic really any further because, frankly, it's not my alley, even though I can talk about it and I have an opinion on it. Like, I could bring up Duke lacrosse and we got to say, quit persecuting by the public court or the people's court, kind of, in a way. Just because most people believe this doesn't mean that the lacrosse proved that woman later murdered her, I believe it was either husband or fiance or boyfriend, whatever it was. It was a serious relationship with this guy, and she ended up murdering him, and she's currently in prison. And she admitted to lying about this after she was caught with this incident, even though she wouldn't give it up. And all those Duke players were found innocent, completely ruined some 18 to 23-year-old kids. These guys who are young adults ruined their entire season. They canceled the rest of their season. They had a championship contending. Had their head coach Mike Pressler, one of the two, just got back into major D1 lacrosse coaching with Bryant, and Bryant's still not a big school. So, point being, I'm not an expert on this. Neither are you, Mr. Feinbaum. So, you really shouldn't talk about this stuff when that's not your expertise. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Feinbaum has a degree in some sort of communications, media, and focused on sports, and has written in his resume for sports. I have not seen, I don't think I've seen a history of Feinbaum talking on CNN's panels for politics. And it's the same thing with the First Take crew. It's the same thing with a lot of people from ESPN. And the only person I can think of from Fox is Jason Whitlock. But frankly, even Whitlock keeps it at a low with that stuff, because even though he gets political at times, that's just topics that are going to come up. When something's not your expertise and that's not your job, and you're asked to do a different job, I just hate how politics and sports get mixed, because one has nothing to do with the other. President Trump, President Obama, as they were /are, you still get to play college football. They're not impeding your rights to watch college football, broadcast college football, talk about college football, and be a part of a sports network. So I don't know why they're really relevant when it says ESPN. I'm not expecting to go in there and see stuff about Trump and players and all this. Okay, we got about the next 13 minutes. The Entertainment in Sports Programming Network is what ESPN stands for. Do you really think that the entertainment in sports part don't go hand in hand? And do you really think that politics is what we find entertaining? We go to you for sports, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm going to wrap this up real quick. College football is still 2 months away. I mean, I think it's August 24th, 2 months from yesterday, the very first game between Miami and Florida, which I am ecstatic for. I'm so glad we get a little bit of a I don't want to say we get dessert before the entree, but we kind of do in a way, because this is going to be so sweet to get college football back, and it's such a high profile game that we don't have to, we can get a high profile game before those Thursday nights and Friday night games that are good games, but they're basically your appetizers. I mean, you're kind of getting in reverse order. Florida, Miami, going to be your dessert. Those Thursday, Friday games are going to be your appetizers. You either get to see very good teams against poor competition, or average teams going up against average teams in a very good game. And then Saturday through Monday is your main course. And honestly, I'm fine with that. You know, if you're cooking dinner, a nice spaghetti dinner, and it's just taking a little longer than 20, 30 minutes, have a slice of pie real quick. And then have a breadstick if they're ready first. And then finally you can go ahead and eat your spaghetti and shoot. Maybe you can get an appetizer with the spaghetti. That analogy is kind of how I look at the start of college football this season. Some people might complain that we get a week 0 game that's so high profile and we don't get more football for the next 5 days. Hey, it's football. And I don't care when I get dessert. As long as I get it, I'm going to be happy. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Also, I'll be coming back sometime, probably next week, for another podcast. Peace out.